Night breaking news coming out of Enterprise. Officials adding additional charges for the mother of Genesis Nova Reid to capital murder and corpse abuse.
A mama rolled a duffel bag to a dumpster at 11:30 at night on Christmas. Her 2-year-old baby was inside. And then she went 53 days without telling a soul. Let me tell you something. This case broke an entire community in half. And by the time you get to the end of this story, you are going to understand exactly why. In every home, behind every closed door, there's a story waiting to be uncovered. Welcome to Dark Whispers, where we dive deep into the hidden truths of domestic crime and the relationships that turn deadly. If you're drawn to real stories, powerful insights, and the shadows most people avoid, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and step into the whispers they never wanted you to hear. Enterprise, Alabama. Small city, southeastern corner of the state. The kind of place where your neighbors actually know your name, where people look out for each other, where kids are supposed to be safe. That is the world Genesis Nova Reid was born into. Genesis was 2 years old. Curly hair, little dimpled hands, the kind of baby that made strangers stop and smile in the grocery store. She lived at the Meadowbrook apartment complex on Apache Drive with her mother, Adrienne Reid. Just the two of them. And for a while, the neighbors knew them both. They would see Adrienne and Genesis out walking together along Apache Drive. Mama and daughter, just living life. Those walks were regular enough that people noticed them. They became part of the normal rhythm of that complex. And then the walk stopped. Nobody could put an exact date on when they stopped. But when people thought back on it later, really thought back, they kept landing on the same season. Christmas. They had not seen that little girl since around Christmas, and they had not thought too hard about it yet, because life moves fast and people get busy. But that feeling, that quiet, nagging feeling that something was off, it was there, sitting in the back of their minds, waiting. Adrienne Reid was 33 years old. She was a mother of 2. By all outward appearances, she was a woman managing her life, getting through her days. But what was happening behind the walls of that apartment on Apache Drive, what had already happened, was something those neighbors Christmas Day. Adrienne Reid took Genesis to visit family in Dothan, about an hour north of Enterprise. A holiday visit. Normal. Genesis was there, seen by family. Just a little girl at Christmas. And then that evening, Adrienne packed her daughter up and drove back home to Enterprise. That was the last time anyone outside of that apartment would ever see Genesis Nova Reid alive. What investigators believe happened after they got home that night. That is the part that is going to stay with you. At approximately 11:30 that same night, a security camera on a neighboring residence caught something on tape. Adrienne Reid, outside, rolling a duffel bag across the apartment complex in the dark. She took it to the dumpster, and she threw it in. Girl. On Christmas night. She threw that bag in and walked away. 2 days later, she was back on camera. Same dumpster. This time she was carrying Genesis's toys and other belongings that the investigators identified as the little girl's. She put those in the dumpster too. Make it make sense. She went back. On purpose. To throw away the traces of her daughter's life. The toys. The little things. Gone. Like none of it ever existed. And then Adrienne Reid went on living her life. Day after day after day. She was moving around Enterprise, going to the store, crossing paths with neighbors. Not one word about Genesis. Not one sign of alarm. Just nothing. 53 days of nothing. Now here is the moment that is going to get you. Valentine's Day, February 14th. One of Genesis's neighbors from the complex ran into Adrienne Reid at a store. He had not seen the baby in a while, and he asked her, just casually, the way neighbors do, "Where is Genesis?" Adrienne Reid looked at him and said, "I don't know," and she walked away. Just kept it moving. No panic, no tears, no urgency. "I don't know," and she was gone. That neighbor did not know what to do with that. It did not sit right. But he filed it away, and it would matter later. Moving on. Because the clock kept ticking, and that baby was still out there somewhere, and Adrienne Reid was still not saying a word. February 16th. Adrienne Reid finally called the police. And here is the story she told them. She said she woke up at around 3 a.m. She said Genesis's bedroom was empty. She said the front door of the apartment was open. She said her 2-year-old daughter had apparently gotten out of bed in the middle of the night on her own and walked out of the apartment. A 2-year-old walked out in the middle of the night. Period. Nobody believed that. The moment police got that call, something was already off. Officers responded to the Meadowbrook Apartments on Apache Drive, and from the very first hours of that search, Adrienne Reid's story was not adding up. A 2-year-old walking out of a front door in the middle of the night, on her own, with no one hearing anything, no one seeing anything, no trail, no footprints, no nothing. Like the logic was not there, and the investigators knew it, but they did what they had to do. They issued a be-on-the-lookout alert for Genesis Nova Reid, 2 years old, curly hair, last seen at the Meadowbrook Apartments, and then the search began. Let me tell you something. When Enterprise showed up for that little girl, they showed up. Law enforcement from Coffee County, the Enterprise Police Department, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, the FBI, all of them, pulling in the same direction. They brought in cadaver dogs. They brought in dive teams. They pulled surveillance footage from every camera in and around that complex. They issued 37 search warrants. They ran down 97 leads. They gathered more than 5 terabytes of digital evidence. 5 terabytes. That is not a small investigation. That is a team of people who refused to let that baby be forgotten. And the community wrapped around this case like you would not believe. Volunteers came out. People organized. Pink became the color of the search, Genesis's color. Pink lights went up around Enterprise. People who had never met that little girl were out here in the cold, walking fields because they needed to bring her home. Over 8,000 hours of investigative work, 75 officers, searches that stretched across 7 different states, following every lead, every tip, every flicker of a possibility. But Genesis was not found. And the more investigators dug into that surveillance footage, the more the picture of Adrienne Reid came into focus. The duffel bag on Christmas night, the return trip to the dumpster 2 days later with Genesis's toys, the timeline that placed Genesis alive at that family visit in Dothan and nowhere after that, the neighbor who got "I don't know" for an answer on Valentine's Day, the 53 days of silence before that missing persons call. Every piece of evidence pointed in one direction. Investigators traced the route of the dumpster. They followed the garbage collection records, and they ended up at the Coffee County landfill, a sprawling site that covers the kind of acreage that makes a search feel almost impossible. That is where they believed Genesis's remains were, and that is where law enforcement was preparing to search, bringing in personnel from surrounding agencies to go through that landfill piece by piece if they had to. Anyways, the evidence was building, and Adrienne Reid was still out here, saying nothing. Then District Attorney James Tarbox stepped to that podium, and he said something that stopped the room. He said that Adrienne Reid had engaged in a campaign of deceit, lies, manipulation, and destruction of evidence every single day from Christmas night to February 16th. And then he said the 4 words that no one in that room was going to forget. She threw her in the trash. His own words. About a mother. About her 2-year-old daughter. She threw her in the trash. The room went silent.
Yeah, hey Joe, and just after over 21 days of searching for Genesis and what could have been her 3rd birthday today, the community is grieving as law enforcement authorities believe she may not be with us. Now, the mother of Genesis, Adrian Reid, had been charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of abuse of a corpse. Now, this comes after Genesis was reported missing by her mother, Adrian Reid, February 16th, claiming she got out of her bed and walked out the front door of their Meadowbrook apartment on Apache Drive. However, neighbors and police say the child wasn't seen in over 3 weeks prior to that date. Some even dated back to Christmas, and that's still the case. Now, over the last 21 days, law enforcement have been searching all over the county, multiple southern states as far as Illinois, and following a number of leads. Now, one of those pieces of evidence being camera footage of Adrian rolling a duffel bag to a dumpster on Christmas night, and then 2 days later returning to that same dumpster carrying Genesis toys and other belongings. Now, but law enforcement have yet to find her body, but they are determined to, as they are searching the Coffee County landfill. In fact, planning to beef up search efforts as Sheriff Byrd is calling in law enforcement personnel from surrounding areas.
Today's an especially heartbreaking day for our community. March 9th would have been Genesis' 3rd birthday. The loss of a child, the most precious and innocent members of our society, is something that cannot be ignored and will not be forgotten. The investigation is far from over. Our focus now turns to bringing Genesis home to the community that loved her.
Oh, so now, after 53 days of playing normal, the charges came. Adrian Reid was taken into custody and charged with capital murder of a child under the age of 14 and abuse of a corpse. 2 felony charges that carry the kind of weight that changes a person's life permanently. And then, because the case continued to develop, a 3rd felony charge was added: capital murder, corpse abuse, and 1 additional count that reflected the full scope of what investigators believed she had done. Here's the part that hits different. The day those additional charges were announced, the day the district attorney stood in front of cameras and laid out the full picture of what Adrian Reid was facing, that day was March 9th, Genesis Nova Reid's 3rd birthday. The little girl who never got to turn 3. The charges came down on the day she, Isa, should have been blowing out candles. The court appearance was scheduled for later that week, and the district attorney's office made their position clear from the start. They were seeking the death penalty, not life without parole, the death penalty. That is how seriously they were taking what they believed Adrian Reid had done. The courtroom portion of this case, at the time of this video, was still in its early stages. But the evidence that investigators had gathered, the surveillance footage, the digital trail, the timeline, the 37 search warrants, the 5 terabytes of data, all of it was going to be waiting when this case went to trial. But hey, no verdict yet. No body yet. Just a community holding its breath, a landfill search still in progress, and a little girl who deserved so much better than the hand she was dealt. Genesis Nova. Reid never got to turn 3. She never got to go to school or ride a bike or do any of the 10,000 small things that make up a childhood. And the people of Enterprise, a city that had never heard her name before February 16th, they were out here in the cold for weeks, carrying her name on their lips, wearing her color, refusing to let her be forgotten. The Coffee County Sheriff stood at that podium on what should have been Genesis's birthday and said that the most precious, most innocent among them would not be forgotten, that the investigation was far from over, that they were going to bring her home. Let me tell you something. That is the kind of case that changes a community. It changes how people look at the children around them. It changes how quickly they act when something feels off. That neighbor who ran into Adrian Reid at the store, the one who got, "I don't know," and felt something wrong in his gut. He is the reminder that our instincts matter. When something does not feel right about a child's safety, we do not file it away. We say something. We make the call. We do not wait 53 days for someone else to figure it out. Genesis deserved better. Every child deserves better. And the only way we honor her is by making sure we see the children around us, really see them, and refuse to look away. Rest easy, baby girl. Enterprise did not forget you.